Joe Biden whining behind closed doors that his son's a victim of the Joe Biden Justice Department. Despite media praise for Biden's respect for the rule of law, he's reportedly accusing the justice system of targeting Hunter, telling a confidant earlier this month, quote, "If I weren't running for re-election, he would have gotten the plea deal." Biden said no pardons, but his White House was acting pretty cagey on whether he'll commute Hunter's sentence.
You're not ruling out that he would commute the sentence.
What I'm saying is that the president, I have not spoken to the president about this, and what I'm saying is he was asked about a pardon. He was asked about the trial specifically, and he answered it very clearly, very forthright. As we know, the sentencing hasn't even been scheduled yet. I don't have anything beyond what the president said. He's been very clear about this. I haven't spoken to the president about this since the verdict came out. And as we all know, the sentencing hasn't even been scheduled yet.
And the media is about to give Biden the Father of the Year award.
He is constantly in contact with his son. They speak at least once a day. So this is something that is going to add more weight to the president's mindset.
I think there's solicitude for him as a father. I don't think the Hunter Biden thing is currently hurting him with voters.
I can't even imagine Donald Trump saying that about any of his children, his family. That is actually loving your kid. And I don't understand why Republicans don't even have compassion for that.
The president's son, Hunter Biden, not being treated the same as everyone else, in many ways being treated worse.
He shouldn't take any crap from Trump, and he needs to be ready, because Donald Trump has 34 felony convictions. Joe Biden, none. Those are the two people on stage.
Take it away, Dana.
Okay, first of all, if you don't know the answer to something, like if you had, so Karine Jean-Pierre, just on that answer about whether Biden would commute the sentence, which means that instead of a pardon saying you're absolved, it means you just don't have to serve the jail sentence, okay? You don't have to do the prison time. Instead of having 20,000 words to say, I haven't spoken to the president about that yet, you can say, I haven't spoken to the president about that.
Period.
Done. Next question. You don't have to do that. That kind of drives me crazy. The next thing is, I think that President Trump would probably say, behind closed doors with Biden, like, you should commute that sentence. And I think that there is a sympathy and an empathy that Trump has about this, about Biden and Hunter as a father and son, because he is the father of children. And I think that's really wrong of a lot of those pundits to say that they don't have a good relationship. Also, I believe that the Hunter's legal problems right now are going to pale in comparison to what's coming starting September 5th, because that trial talks about Hunter Biden as a cheater, that you cheated on your taxes. And all of this gets back to, is it closer then to the big guy? Because now we're talking about, how did he earn that money? Where was that money coming from? And that's happening right before the election. I actually think that a lot of people in America would say, you can't say on the gun form that you're not an addict when you're clearly smoking crack every 30 minutes and going to the 7-Eleven. Like, they get that. The jurors got that. I think everyone says that. They also can say, gosh, I feel bad that he's an addict. I hope that he stays in recovery. I actually think that the country is pulling for him. Like, just stay the course, Hunter, stay sober. Nobody wants anything bad to happen to you that way, but there are consequences for doing bad things. Then the last thing I would say is that this brand of the Biden crime family is very effective. And I think it negates or balances out anything that Trump got in the 34 felony counts that Joe Scarborough likes to talk about, because you can really wrap your head around being a cheater on your taxes. Everyone gets that.
Greg, I believe you were the first to use the phrase Biden crime family many years ago.
Yeah, it's in my book, The Biden Crime Family. Still on Amazon. I do the audio as well.
Nice.
Yeah, I think this is an example of the Biden family making lemonade out of lemons, just coined that, or in Hunter's case, cocaine out of baby laxative. You got the plea deal got exposed by the whistleblower, so they shifted to a media-approved op. This is a really devastating verdict for the family. In reality, it's probably the most insignificant charge compared to the kickbacks, the money laundering, and the influence peddling. So Hunter takes one for the team, because the team really needs a distraction from this upcoming nightmare. The key here for the media is to focus on the father-son relationship, to exploit it politically so you gain sympathy for Joe and distract from the bigger problems, as I've said earlier.
Yes.
But the real question is, why do you need to do this? Like, why do you have to do this? It's because your client, Joe Biden, isn't fit to stand trial. He isn't fit to be president. Maybe if you have to try so hard to save this guy, it should tell you that he's incapacitated and that you're enabling Joe the same way Joe enabled Hunter. And maybe it's no longer healthy for the country to continue trying to do these things. I think you're right. I think Trump should put Joe's mind at ease. Say, you know what? I'm going to commute Hunter on the. If I win, I'll take care of this. So you don't have to run. If you're running to save Hunter, you don't have to. I'll take care of it. I'm a man of my word. And when you think about it, Hunter and Trump's cases are very similar. It's all about filling out a form. And, in Trump's case, how do you fill out a form when there's nothing you can check that makes sense about this sort of payment? So they said whatever, it was a payment to the lawyer, whatever. And then in Hunter's case, he couldn't fill it out because if he told the truth, he couldn't get the gun, and if he lied, he broke the law. So in both cases, it's kind of similar. It came down to what you wrote down on a piece of paper. So I think that there is a bit of sympathy there, and I think it makes the Republicans look like the better party because they're saying, look, we don't want to get political on this. We think this charge, even though he broke the law constitutionally, is a bit weird. So we're we want him commuted.
Do you believe that Donald Trump, Judge Jeanine, should announce that he will commute Hunter Biden's sentence if he is reelected?
I think that Donald Trump is the type of person who would do that. I think the fact that he made a decision not to go after Hillary Clinton when everybody was yelling, lock her up, and he took a lot of heat for that. He said, I want to look forward, and for all those people who are looking to criticize him, and say he's going to be Hitler, this guy has proven that he has more capacity to forgive than the Democrats. And let me just say, Joe Biden is wrong about something. He said, if he weren't running for office, his son would have gotten that plea deal. That plea deal was an illegal plea deal that was unprecedented by the Department of Justice. They admitted it themselves. No one gets immunity in perpetuity. It's just not done in the justice system. And secondly, Joe is a very weak leader. He is a very weak man. He is someone who didn't provide or demand that there be accountability, okay? And I hate listening to these people talk about, Donald Trump wouldn't do it for his own kids. Donald Trump didn't need to do it for his own kids because Donald Trump set guidelines. Donald Trump told his kids, you don't drink, you don't smoke, and you don't do drugs from the time they were this high. And I know this for a fact. All right, Joe Biden obviously is not that guy. And he exhibits it every day in front of the world by saying, we'll keep the Venezuelan gangs here. We'll keep the Tajikistans here. I don't know what to do with them. He's just a weak man. So having said all that, they took all of these expired misdemeanors and against Donald Trump and they resurrected them. What we ought to do is take the expired statute of limitations that the Department of Justice allowed to expire against Hunter Biden, give them new life so that we can prosecute Hunter in the biggest years that he got money from Burisma and from foreign countries. And then let's go to town, guys. Let's talk about money laundering, foreign countries, FARA violations, Uzbekistan, all of the countries that they got millions from, and that whole Biden family sitting front row at that courthouse. They weren't just there because they love Hunter. They're all there because they got cash in their accounts because of what Hunter Biden did. And you can't deny it.
So, Marie, are you under the impression that there will be no pardon, no commutation given at all?
I would predict here that there's 0% chance that Joe Biden commutes or pardons his son.
Why?
I just do not think that he will do it because he's not that kind of man. And Judge Jeanine, I respectfully disagree with what you said about the family sitting in the front row of that courtroom together. This is an incredibly close family. They have been together through so much tragedy in their lives. They have been through enormous challenges. Addiction is a huge problem for many Americans, and I think there is a lot of sympathy and empathy for what Hunter went through, for what his family has gone through. And I do think at the end of the day that when voters go into that voting booth and it's Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, not Donald Trump versus Hunter Biden, that Donald Trump's myriad of legal challenges, which go well beyond the case he was already convicted in, and his ability to try, and he has said he wants to have revenge against his political enemies. He says this over and over again, guys.
You raised a good point,
we hear
though.
this.
You raised an interesting comparison. I would vote for Hunter Biden before I would vote for Joe Biden.
Okay, well,
because at least Hunter Biden has a brain. Joe Biden, you cannot believe for a second that Joe Biden is going to be the nominee. You look at him. You saw him on the Juneteenth thing.
100% he will be.
He can barely
We can put a bet on it right here.
I'll bet you. What do you want to bet?
We'll come up with it in the break.
Okay.
I'll be the witness.
And the revenge will be the success.
Yes.
That's not what he says.
That's what he said.
That's what he said. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.